Have you ever just stopped and wondered why we as a species seem to be so good at rejecting our saviors? It's this strange pattern that you see again and again throughout history. Well, today we're going to dive into a fascinating Bahá'í text to explore this exact human paradox. Why do we so often fail to see the very truth we claim to be searching for?
I mean, really think about it for a second. For centuries, entire civilizations have prayed for guidance. They've yearned for a divine teacher, and they've waited for some promised one to arrive. And yet, when that figure actually shows up, history tells us the story is almost always the same: denial, opposition, and rejection. So, what gives? Why does this keep happening? That's the mystery we're going to try and solve today. All right, so to get to the bottom of this, our source text says we need to look inward first. It suggests the problem isn't really a lack of evidence out there in the world, but a series of internal roadblocks, what it calls veils or clouds that just cloud our judgment and stop us from seeing things clearly. And it gets incredibly specific about what these clouds are. According to the text, we're basically veiled by our own stuff. Our minds are just full of these preconceived ideas about what truth is supposed to look like. Our hearts are attached to worldly things like status or possessions. We listen to gossip and idle talk. We focus our eyes on things that are temporary, that are just going to fade away. And maybe the biggest one of all, we cling to this blind imitation of the past, refusing to question the traditions we've been handed. This quote just nails the problem perfectly. People take their own small, limited knowledge, what they've always been told, what their leaders say, and they use that as a measuring stick for something infinite. So when a new message comes along that doesn't fit neatly into their little box, they don't question the box. No, they attack the message. So this sets up two totally different ways of seeing things. On one side, you've got judgment by human standards, asking, does this new person match what's in our old books? Do they have power? Are they rich? And the text argues that this path almost always leads straight to denial. But on the other side, you have recognition through what's called a sanctified heart, a state where you don't need some external authority to tell you it's true because you can just feel it, you can perceive it directly. And look, this isn't just some abstract theory about human psychology. The text points to history as Exhibit A, basically saying this pattern of rejection isn't a fluke, it's the norm. It has happened over and over and over again. Just think about the giants of faith. In their own time, they were treated like criminals and outcasts. Abraham was literally thrown into a fire. Moses was called a liar. Jesus was homeless because of the fierce opposition he faced. And Muhammad endured just relentless persecution. Every single one of them was rejected by the very people they came to help. And here's the kicker. The opposition wasn't just coming from, the masses or the ignorant. The text makes it really clear that it was often led by the most respected people in society, the learned of their age. The priests, the scholars, the religious leaders. They were the ones whose authority was being challenged, and they were the ones who fought back the hardest. So all of this sounds pretty tragic, doesn't it? Just this endless cycle of suffering and misunderstanding. But what if it's not a mistake? The source we're looking at argues that this isn't a flaw in the system, it's actually a feature. This whole pattern of rejection is part of a deliberate, divine test. It's called the principle of separation and distinction. The whole idea is that the arrival of one of these divine teachers acts like a kind of spiritual filter. It's designed to separate the people who are genuinely searching for truth with a pure heart from those who are just blindly following tradition or, seeking power for themselves. It's a way of revealing who we really are on the inside. So how does this test work? Well, it's pretty brilliant, actually. These great teachers show up not as kings or conquering heroes with armies, but as ordinary people. They come in the garb of mortal men, often without money, without a fancy education, without any worldly power. They just don't fit the epic expectations we've built up in our heads. And this quote right here, this gets to the absolute heart of it. If a divine being showed up with overwhelming, undeniable power, like shining in the plenitude of his glory, who would ever question it? Nobody. Belief would be automatic. There'd be no choice, no real test of our character. The text argues that the only way to tell the truly sincere from everyone else is for the truth to show up in a way that requires real, genuine insight to see it. And that's the big reveal right there. The challenge that's been put to humanity time and time again hasn't been about bowing down to overwhelming might. It's been a test of sight,
of our ability to recognize something extraordinary even when it shows up in a totally ordinary package. Okay, so if this is the test, how do we pass it? How can we in our own lives learn to see beyond all those veils of understanding? Well, the source text doesn't just diagnose the problem, it actually offers a prescription. It tells us how to get that clear vision. It lays out a pretty clear 4-step path. First, sanctify your soul, which basically means clear out all that internal junk we talked about earlier. Second, and this one is huge, stop using other people, even really respected leaders, as your final authority for truth. Third, put your trust directly in God. And when you do that, you get to step 4, the ability to recognize truth all by itself, by its own light, not because somebody else told you it was true. It's about developing your own spiritual compass. And this brings us to one last really powerful, mind-bending idea. From this point of view, all the rejection, all the persecution, it's not a sign of failure. In fact, that adversity is like oil feeding the flame of a lamp. All the opposition, paradoxically, just ends up making the truth burn even brighter and proves how resilient it really is.
So we'll leave you with this to think about. This whole historical pattern forces us to ask a really personal question. What are our modern-day veils? What common knowledge or established traditions or authorities might be our blind spots right now, preventing us from seeing a vital new truth that's maybe sitting right in front of us? It's a challenging question, for sure, but definitely one worth pondering.